Hello and welcome to today's video. Today we're going to be talking about Blazor hosting models. Now on the screen we've got the different hosting models available for Blazor. First we're going to talk about Blazor Server. Now Blazor Server is an ASP.NET Core application and it runs similar to your standard ASP.NET Core sequence. You have your console application, which includes a program class that builds and runs the application. And in addition to that, you have your startup class where configurations are tweaked. Now, the pages are built using Razor and the technology varies between client and server-side methods within the application. For instance, for a client-side task, it takes advantage of WebAssembly from the browser. In contrast to that, as you can see in the diagram, it uses a SignalR connection between the client and the server. Now onto Blazor WebAssembly. Now Blazor WebAssembly lives solely in the web browser, and what basically happens is that it uses the WebAssembly that's configured in all major browsers, and what it can do is it can run C# code or Blazor code in this instance. So you don't need an ASP.NET Core application. So it works in a similar way to a JavaScript framework like React. Because in addition to your client-side application, if you need to include server-side functionality, you can host that on a separate API and integrate the two together. The major difference between a Blazor WebAssembly and a JavaScript framework is that client-side methods use WebAssembly, again, which is a new technology integrated into all major browsers. So now I'm going to talk you through a Blazor Server application that I've created. So I've started it up, I'm in my startup class and I need to configure some services. So there's a couple of things I need in here. I need to add the Razor pages. Razor pages is something you use within Blazor. We also need to add server-side Blazor as well. And one additional thing that I've done is I've added a singleton service of language service. Now I'm in my configuration method here, and also I need to map the Blazor hub, and I need to point a fallback page to the /_host. So this is _host, as you can see here. So this is basically almost like your template. In here you've got your app, and then it's a type of app, which is this file here. So that just basically routes you through to your Blazor app. So once that's been done, the language service singleton that we set has been initialized. So when the constructor is run, we create a new instance of languages, and it will basically populate some languages in there for us. So we've got English and French, as you can see there. English and French has been populated to this property here. So now we're actually in our main index.razor. So this is basically where all the content is. So it's going to display a list of languages, and it's just going to go through each one. So we've injected our language service into this Razor view. We're going to list all the languages. We've also got an input button here, and this is basically where you can add a new language to this list, which will send up to the language service, and then you've got a button there to actually execute the request. So as you can see here, it's calling the onInitialized method, and it's going to get all the languages from the language service. So this is going back to our language service. It returns all the languages, which you can see is English and French. Now it does it a second time. Now I believe that the first time it does it, it's for the server side, and the second time it's for the client side. So once it's established that SignalR connection between the client and the server. And so yeah, once again going through and getting all the languages, and there we go, it's displayed the two languages, English and French. Now if we want to add a third language, we can do that. So we can type German in, press the button, it goes through this message input click handler here. It makes a call to the language service again, and it calls the add language method, inputting what we've just inputted, which is German. Goes through there, it adds it to the languages. So as you can see, we've now got English, French and German in the languages property. And there we go, we've got 3 languages listed. So now I'm going to talk you through a Blazor WebAssembly example. So in this Visual Studio solution here, I've got 2 projects. I've got an API and a Blazor WebAssembly project. So the way this is going to work is that both the API and the WebAssembly are going to run at the same time. The API is going to run on localhost 9000 and Blazor WebAssembly is going to run on localhost 9001. Before I start up the project, I'm going to talk you through how Blazor WebAssembly works. For some reason, the debug tools don't seem to work with Blazor WebAssembly. I'm not too sure why that is, but it might be something to do with the fact that at time of recording, Blazor WebAssembly is currently in preview. So let's have a look and just see what exactly it does to make it work. So we've gone into our program class here, and the only real difference is that we've got a Blazor WebAssembly host, which basically starts up our application. We've also got a startup on here. If I go into that, we're basically adding our app component, which is basically this file here, and this will route to our main layout, which is just basically a HTML template. And that will eventually, the body method that you saw there will eventually go to our index razor page. Now this is very similar to our Blazor Server example. The only real difference is that we're basically, when we're getting the data, we're calling an API. So we're calling our localhost 9000 API project. And when we add a new language in, we're basically doing the same thing as well. So let's run the application and see what happens. So now we're going to debug the API project. The WebAssembly project is also going to be running, but as I said earlier, we can't debug that. So let's just debug the API. And the first thing we need to do is to add cores. Now I encourage you to read my article on cores. There's a link in the description about it. But basically we're giving our WebAssembly application permission to use the data from it. So you can see here we've got a reference to our WebAssembly URL, which is localhost 9001. And we're also adding a language service like in our Blazor Server example. And this is just basically telling us, we basically set up a policy for cores there. That's just telling the application to use it. So now it's initializing the language service, our singleton. And this is something a little bit different to our Blazor Server example. We've basically created an API controller for language, and it's basically made a request to get all the languages. So this is basically what's happening when we initialize the index.razor. It's coming in here and it's basically requesting all the data from our language API controller. So that in turn is going through to the language service, getting all the languages, and that's that done. As you can see here on our application, it's got our languages of English and French. But let's say we want to add a new language. Let's add German in, press the add language. And so this is basically going back to our language controller, our language API controller. We've got this model here is passing in a language of German. So this is basically what's happening here. It's doing a post request and adding language as our input, and then sending it through to our add method in the language API controller. So that goes to the language service again. It adds the languages, and as you can see, it's updated with the language. So yeah, minor problem there, but then it basically, so it's added the language and then it gets all the languages again and returns them. So basically then we've got an updated list of languages. And so there you go. We've got 3 languages in there. We've got English, French and German. Hope you found this useful, and until next time, it's goodbye.